don't want drugs coming across our border or any border. And whether it's Mexico or Canada or wherever, because they're starting now in Canada, they're starting to go up north. But whether it's Mexico or Canada, we're going to explain to them quickly that if you allow fentanyl and these drugs to come through your country, we're going to charge you large-scale tariffs on everything you send into the United States.
So there was Donald Trump early on the morning of the presidential election day, giving the rationale for what is now an imminent threat for Canada's economy. You heard him say that Canada would get the message quickly, and indeed it's come, that the U.S. will hit all Canadian exports to the U.S. with a 25% tariff unless Ottawa takes action on fentanyl smuggling into the U.S. from Canada and stops illegal migrants from crossing the border into the United States. Let's take a look at one of those border crossings again. Live pictures. This is Detroit, as seen by and from Windsor. And the mayor of Windsor, Ontario, is Drew Dilkens, frequent guest of ours. It's always good to spend some time and hear some perspective on cross-border issues. So, Mayor Dilkens, welcome back to our program today.
Good morning, Heather.
I know there was uncertainty and anxiety in your community when Donald Trump won on November the 5th, but now we have something substantive, this new tariff threat of 25% across the board. What's your immediate overall reaction?
Well, it's a bit of, rinse, wash, repeat, and that cycle going on again. And I recall the last term of the president where there were aluminum tariffs. We've gone through the softwood lumber tariff issue multiple times over the past decades. And so this is just another, I guess, shot across the bow, but it's one we should take seriously, especially in a city like mine where we are the auto capital of Canada. Detroit, just a kilometer away, is the auto capital of the U.S. And our supply chains are so tightly integrated that we have to really take note and understand what's going to happen here, because it could have a significant impact not only on people in my city and my region in Canada, but also those in the United States.
I want to talk about impact specifically in your community in a moment, but that whole notion of we've been through this before and the kinds of threats, because you were mayor as of 2014, so you've been through the first Trump administration. Do you take this threat seriously as a true threat, or do you think it is a negotiating tactic?
I think it's likely a negotiating tactic, and we saw what happened before, where when the threat of tariffs were put in place, our diplomatic corps, our Team Canada approach went full force into the United States, working with premiers, working with governors, talking about the trade relationship, and getting right down to sort of micro state level issues where a tariff and how a tariff, if applied, would impact various states and various governors. And of course, there's political impact there. And so the team did really well at that particular point in time. And I think, this may just be a negotiating tactic, understanding that USMCA is up for renegotiation in 2026. That's a long time. That's halfway through his presidential term. And so if that's the case, what can he do to be a disruptor in the short term that gets everyone to the negotiating table and gets them to the table fast? And this is one of those things that will get a lot of attention.
You mentioned the auto industry, and certainly we think of Windsor in connection with that. But if this were to go through at 25% across the board, what would be the impact in dollars and jobs in your community, and what sectors, not just auto, that would be most vulnerable in this?
Wow, that is such a hard question to answer. And I think the impact could be very immediate. But again, I really believe that the impact certainly is not just to my country and my city and my region. It also stands to have a huge impact on workers in Detroit and Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. And so there's lots to lose on both sides of this tariff war. And of course, you would expect any country that is seeing tariffs applied like Canada, we'd simply have a retaliatory measure like happened last time. Don't forget the aluminum tariffs. Excuse me, the aluminum tariffs that were put in place in 2018, it was less than a year before they were finally removed. And a compromise was sorted out. And so I hope we don't have to get there. I certainly listen to what the president-elect is saying when he's concerned about immigration, when he's concerned about crime and drugs. I mean, I think we as Canadians have that same concern, that we want to get tougher on crime. Things have certainly changed here in the past many years, and I don't think a lot of us are happy with what we see in terms of crime. And in terms of illegal immigration, Canada into the United States, last year there were about 19,500 illegal immigrants crossing from Canada into the United States, which was more than the past 17 years combined. And so although I think it's fair to say the problem largely exists for illegal immigration on the U.S. southern border, it's hard for them to ignore that the numbers seem to be going up here between Canada and the U.S., and something has to be done.
Two more questions, if there's time, Mayor Dilkins. Thank you. Number one, as we look to what now? What the response should be. I mean, you've alluded to that. But for you specifically, to whom will you be talking now? And what do you think your role and that of other mayors can be?
I think working with our Premier and Premier Ford certainly has been very vocal, very quick to get on board and say we need to have a meeting of First Ministers on the topic. We need to reinvigorate this Team Canada approach. And I think I've heard Premier Ford even say he's willing to have a separate agreement with the United States if it means that Mexico isn't tightening up their immigration problem or being seen as being a backdoor for Chinese imports. And so Premier Ford certainly has shown strong leadership here. I'm behind him and willing to do whatever I can to lend my voice on behalf of my city and the people who live here to make sure that we come out of this stronger and that we don't get hurt in the meantime, because there's lots of jobs at stake if this isn't done correctly.
And finally, I was looking at some of the coverage out of Windsor after Donald Trump won on November the 5th. And you had talked about mentioning the Team Canada approach. One of the things that you were preoccupied with was the federal relationship. And that was, in fact, where you found the greatest concern, because you said you were more vulnerable on our federal government side because of the personal relationship between Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau, the president and the prime minister, that the prime minister in this country had spent all of his domestic political capital. From the federal perspective, leading Team Canada, what is your greatest concern?
Well, listen, that hasn't gone away. I just think it continues to erode each and every day. And again, what I said was, a prime minister in Canada needs to have strong domestic political capital to carry weight with the United States. And we see it's just time for an election here. We need to reset. We need to get tough on crime. We need to make sure that we're dealing with the issues that are important to the United States. But they're not just issues important to the United States. They're issues that are important to us. We don't want to see bad people come to our country. We don't want to see illegal immigration. We don't want to see drugs. And so I think we certainly share a lot more of these issues in common than in terms of issues that divide us. So let's figure this out and come out stronger on the other end and have a good relationship moving forward for the next 4 years with our largest trading partner.